Hello and welcome to the Magic of Fishing. Today you join me on a hot, blustery September afternoon. It's Sunday and it's been an eventful weekend. Yesterday I went for a marvellous walk with my wife Rachel and our little puppy Bunny. We got up quite high above where we've moved to in Guildford, got some fantastic views over the town and finished the walk along the River Wey. And any of you who follow the channel will know it's one of my favourite rivers. I've been fishing it ever since I moved south some 25 years ago as a young man from Sheffield, and just seeing the river back in the sunshine yesterday made me feel like I had to get back on the bank and fishing it again today. But we've had a good mate's 50th birthday party in the meantime, and we didn't finish till well after 1 AM last night, so forgive me if I'm looking and sounding a little bit worse for wear today. I'm really excited though, because I've come to a busy town stretch of the river that I've walked along many times. Fished once quite a few years back and did okay, but some good pals of mine who I've been getting to know since moving to the area, or one or two that I already knew who lived in Guildford, have told me that this particular stretch can throw up the odd big perch and some big roach as well. I've seen pictures of £2 plus roach and perch well over £3, which both of those fish are dream fish for me. I'm still yet to catch a £2 roach. So thanks to all those people for urging me to get down here. And you know, the sun is covered by a cloud at the moment, so it's feeling quite nice with these overcast skies. It's been really blue earlier on and yesterday, pure blue in fact. It's fantastic to see after the autumnal feeling drizzly and wet week we had last week. So it's not long after I caught a barbel from this very river just a couple of nights ago. If you've seen that video, I've got some killer bites from that evening. If you've seen it, I was swarmed by mozzies and gnats and all sorts that evening, but it was well worth it. And let's get fishing and see what we can manage today. It's a lovely looking but busy stretch of river. You can probably hear sirens in the background. We're not far from the town centre. It's not quite classed as a city, Guildford, even though it's got a cathedral and a university. And opposite me you can see Dapdune Wharf, popular area for people to come in the summer. Behind me there's lots of university or student accommodation, and upstream you can see some of that. And with bigger fish in mind, I brought a selection of bait today. A pint of red maggots, which is more about attracting small fish, which might in turn attract big stripeys. I've got some hempen castor, knowing that there might be some big roach to be caught. Some corn for the hook, so we can get through any small stuff. And a tub of lobworms, which I think will be my main line of attack. I've also mixed up some sticky, dark, quite hempy ground bait, and I've already put in a couple of balls quite close in, just a rod length out, where I'm intending to fish. As you can see, there's plenty of activity on the water as well as along the bankside here. Being in a town centre, there's boats, paddle boarders, all kinds of people enjoying the river in all kinds of ways, and I intend to be one of them. I'm going to fish somewhat differently to how I'd normally approach a river today. I've been told a lot of the better fish can be found closer in, just off the main flow, and there's plenty of depth. I've just plumbed up, it's probably about 5 foot down there, and I've come armed with a long 15-foot float rod and a centre pin reel, a bit beefier an outfit than I'd normally fish for small silvers. It's an Acolyte, Drennan Acolyte plus rod, so got a bit of beef or backbone to it as well as the length. And I've got £6 main line on the on the reel, and that's down to £4 hook length to a barbless size 12 hook. And above the hook I've got the usual quick change swivel and a number 8 telltale shot, and then very close to that I've got another 2 number 8s, another 2 number 8s, and they will actually sit on the bottom. I'm going to be fishing over depth or laying on. Above those shot I've got one other small bunch of number 8s and a 2-gram Olivet. So the Olivet will get the bait down nice and quick, and most of that shot will lay along the river bed with a big bait like double corn or a lobworm on that size 12, and I'm just going to fish off the rod tip, so the float is going to be held back against the flow with a tight line from the rod tip to the float, much like pole fishing, and that brings me to the float. The float is a Dave Harrell Bollo, a number 4 2.5 gram model, and it's much like a big pole float, carbon stem, a thick bristle tip and a bit of a shoulder on it, and that'll allow me to hold back against the flow and keep the float and the rig nice and stable. So I'm fishing probably a good 2 foot over depth with plenty of shot on the deck, and as soon as that shot gets moved by a fish, that float will sail away off downstream. That's what we hope anyway. The butt of the rod is on my bag down by my side, and it's just going straight onto a rod rest, almost 90 degrees to the water, and that gets me the maximum length of the rod out into the swim, so I can fish straight off the tip just a few yards downstream. So let's start with a juicy lobworm. I've had these going for the last few weeks and keeping them in the fridge, but there's still a few left. That hook looks relatively small, but should hopefully be nice and sharp. It's a medium wire model. Should a perch come along and take a fancy to that. So no complicated cast required, just laying the rig in down where that ground bait's hopefully settled and started drawing a few of the smaller fish at least. And if we can keep these overcast conditions, I'll be very happy. Bright sun, not the best for targeting bigger perch or roach, but I'm going to fish into the evening too, till dusk, as long as I can see that float. And if things are a bit slow this afternoon, I'll just enjoy watching life go past on the river, and we'll hope things improve in the evening. I had a good plumb about, and where the float is, or the rig is being held, there's just a little bit of a depression there in the river bed, just an extra half foot of depth. And once I'd established that, I just got everything set up so it'd be nice and comfortable. It's almost like fishing the pole, but just with a longer line between the rod tip, and there went, I don't know if you caught that, a couple of small prey fish just leapt clear of the water there, right close to the float. So that's a brilliant sign that there might be 1 or 2 active perch down there. Did put lots of chopworm in the ground bait, lots of dendrobina chopworm, as well as 1 or 2 lobworms. Castor and hemp in case it's more a case of a roach afternoon than a perch afternoon. But I've been excited about fishing this stretch of river ever since I moved here. It's not within walking distance, but I can drive down within 5-10 minutes. There's a little car park nearby, and as long as you can get space there, it's fairly convenient fishing. Only a quick walk up from there. I brought the barrow chair, and although I've not had a bite yet, that float looks absolutely spot on. There you can see the tight line, just gently holding it back against the flow. Then of course you've got those number 8s strung out along the deck, keeping the bait in position as well. And it's been a while since I've fished like this, but rather than trotting today, I fancied this laying on technique, static bait. And the last time I fished here was a good 4 or 5 years ago, and it was in the late autumn or early winter, and I was fishing a feeder right over towards the bank there, and I did fairly well. I had some nice bream, some roach, and a few smaller perch, but it was possible to do that at that time of year because there weren't so many boats, paddle boarders, rowers. Fishing that style this time of year, you'd be reeling in all the time for river traffic, so this is a nice convenient way of just keeping things simple, keep the feed really accurate, build up the swim through the afternoon. And if we can start seeing a few bites on the bigger baits of worm or lobs, even if they're only modest sized perch and roach, it'll make for a really enjoyable afternoon and evening. In fact, the last time I fished this laying on style of fishing, well, it wasn't actually that long back. It was soon after a viewer of the Magic of Fishing, Martin, had sent me his handmade perch bobbers, and I gave them a go up nearer home with the worm. Did manage a couple of small perch, really enjoyable fishing. If you'd seen that video, it's not one of my more fish packed offerings, but it's just really about celebrating the magic of childhood style fishing and getting back to basics, not knowing what's going to pull the float under next. And today feels much the same, although I have been told, you know, it is a stretch that's been known to throw up some good fish at different times of the year, whether it's the summer, autumn, winter, and it's yet another piece of river that I'm looking forward to getting to know a bit better over the next few years now I've moved. But after the adrenaline packed barbel session, or certainly an adrenaline packed end to that barbel session earlier in the week, it just feels right to be watching a float again and trying for big fish, but not, you know, exclusively one species of fish or necessarily giant fish, but just a better stamp of fish than you might expect trotting maggots or hempen tares, for example. There's certainly been a few small fish topping as I've been setting up, and I think that ground bait, a few maggots going in, should hopefully get their interest, and in turn hopefully a few bigger fish show up, whether it's predators or big silvers. And if not, we can try trotting down, or a bit of strep pegging where you let the rig go down, you know, a yard or two at a time, then hold it back, explore the swim that way. But I've been advised by a couple of pals that this is a great approach on this stretch, is to fish the margins and a nice big bait. Keep the faith, be confident, and wait for those better fish to find it. Alright, we've given that a good 15 or 20 minutes. The worm is still on. Let's try a little more lively dendrobina. That's really what I've been feeding in the tiny balls of ground bait that have gone in so far. So we'll try and match the hatch. Give this a good 15 minutes or so, and then we've got corn to try as well if it doesn't feel like there's any perch in the swim just yet. But it will be the little particles of ground bait, the red maggots, the casters, which bring in the smaller fish, and if we can get them really active, that should attract bigger stripeys. In fact, this is exactly how my granddad used to fish whenever we were on a river, whether it was the Derwent in Derbyshire, when we were fishing for trout and grayling when I was a really young lad. I write about it in the book, The Magic of Fishing. We used to call it the river, just simply the river. We're going to the river today, Grandad, or the pond. They were the only two options for the first few years of my fishing career. And then later on he took me to the Trent, which blew my mind. It was so big and wild and daunting, but could be so generous. Certainly back in the 1980s, before things went south for a while. And I write about a day on there, on the tidal Trent at Marnham with my granddad in the book too, where I'd perhaps started getting a bit more sophisticated with my fishing. I'd learned to fish the feeder as well as float, and I was fishing a bit with the Sheffield Juniors match squad, getting some coaching off some brilliant blokes like the late great Jim Baxter, the author of a couple of fantastic books on float fishing if you've not come across them. One's called The Rising Antenna, which is all about waggler float fishing, and there's also Stick Float Wizardry, my favourite. It's got lots of angling greats in there, lots of short chapters about how they use the stick float and how it developed over the years through the 60s, 70s, beyond. Jim really was a master of float fishing, but I'd started getting a little bit more confident and sophisticated in my fishing, and my granddad, you know, was by that time probably into his 80s or certainly late 70s, and his idea of a good day on the bank was a pipe, some peace, a few sandwiches packed by my grandma, and maybe a pint on the way home. But that one particular day, I remember he was using his old perch bobber style float and a worm bait down by some. Oh, and I've just had a bite. I'm talking about worms. That's not come to anything just yet, but a couple of quick dips there. Yeah, my granddad was very patiently sat with this perch bobber style float and a big worm next to some weeds, smoking his pipe, and I was catching lots of smaller fish on the feeder, lots of skimmers, silver bream, pommies as we used to call them, and gudgeon and roach and that kind of thing. And I remember starting to feel a bit sort of sorry for him that afternoon, and thinking, well, you know, he doesn't really know how to catch fish like I'm learning how to catch fish. But later that day he caught an absolutely massive perch, the biggest fish I'd seen at that point. There were no carp or commercial fisheries back then, of course, and it must have been a good £3 plus perch. It absolutely dwarfed anything I'd seen at that stage, and I just remember a whole new respect for him growing that day. And it was a really good reminder that simple ways of fishing, patient ways of fishing with baits like worm, natural baits, can catch you some of the better fish. So let's hope we can prove that today. As the sun peeps out from behind the clouds, I'm going to put in another little nugget of ground bait, crushed hemp in there, dark mix, but no other real food items in there apart from that initial few that I put in. Another little dip there on the float. And again, the point of this is just to keep some activity going through the water. Goes in just above the float. It'll probably go downstream by only a yard at most, being a nice firm ball sticky mix. It should land roughly where the hook bait is. And just as those balls break down and let off little particles down the swim, that's what should bring in the smaller fish to investigate. Well, we have got the target species. That may be a tiddler, but it's a perch on a little dendrobina to start. Let's try another and see whether we might have a little shoal that's turned up. Or whether he was a one-off for now. Just nice to see that first proper bite. Sailed away. A nice little jagging resistance on the strike. Well folks, I may be about to... Oh, that's a nice little bite. Sailed away, but it's just another small roach. And the reason I've caught that roach is I've got double maggot on the hook, which is not what I set out to fish today, but I've really wanted just to check that there are some silvers, small silvers that is, in the area, because I really wasn't getting much action on the worm or corn at all. Hour and a half, couple of hours into the session now, and it's been very slow on the bigger bait, so just to prove. Oh, and a pike swirled at that. So there are some predators, but not the kind we're after. So yeah, just to check that there are some silvers in the area, I've been going onto the maggot and getting plenty of bites. In fact, the fact a small jack pike just swirled at that roach on the way in could help explain why things have been a little slow on the bigger baits. But my sense is, although I am getting roach on the maggot, and I'm going to carry on fishing it for a little bit longer just to try and get a better sense of what's down there, I don't think there's naturally any perch in this swim at the moment. That's to say, they weren't already here. Apart from that small one I've had, I'd really expect a lot more action on the worm if there were perch naturally holding in this spot. So I'm going to give it a little bit longer fishing like this just to get a sense of what's down there. But if there's nothing more than the occasional little roach, I think what I'm going to do is move. Although I talked about building this swim earlier, I've been trying to do that for the last hour and a half, 2 hours, and it's not really led to anything. So there's a nice big bend further up where it should be really deep in the margin, I imagine. I don't know because I've never fished it, but I'd imagine that current pushing into the inside of the bend has gouged out a bit of depth, and I fancy that might be a bit more of a natural perch holding area to give a go for the last few hours of the session. Well, I'm glad I gave it a little bit longer because this is a better fish on the maggot. It's a shame it's not on worm or corn, which is what I set out to fish, but I'm not complaining and I'm not rushing this. It's not a monster, but it's a decent feeling fish. along there. So it's been worth persevering. It's a tiny jack pike. Not what I hoped. Not what I hoped. He's in. Oh, this is a bit of a better perch by the looks of it. Oh, very nice. At last, a sign of something a bit bigger, and that's before I've made the move. Not a biggie, but better fish. Well, he's a handsome stripey. Seems I'm going to have to persevere in this spot a bit longer and see if they're going to keep getting bigger. So maybe a change in light conditions, or maybe a one-off, but definitely encouraging, and that was a nice fish to strike into and feel proper jagging resistance. I can only imagine, oh, the thrill if I could find its mum or dad. But we'll definitely give it a bit longer in this spot. One of my relatively new mates, Matt Hunt, who's one of the few people who've been really generous and helpful with their advice about this part of the River Wey near Guildford and Godalming. He said he's going to come down and say hello this evening as well, so we'll see what he thinks about where I'm fishing and how I'm getting on, and either keep persevering here or perhaps make a move with his many years of experience of fishing this part of the way. Well, as you can see, folks, I did make the move. Matt, who's still in the vicinity somewhere, he's gone for a little walk and a chat with one of his mates on the phone, but he's come down to see me. He's such a diamond geezer, as they say in these parts. He's not been able to do much fishing himself this summer, but he knows this river like the back of his hand, and he's been down to suggest another swim. This is actually one of his favourites, and the early signs are not hugely promising. We've not had instant bites. I've had a small dace out and a perch on the worm, but not a biggie. A swingable fish in the first sort of half hour, so it is looking like it's going to be tough. We can't work out why. Weather conditions are good. We've had a bit of rain in the river, and this is a really deep margin at the end of the big broad bend up above me, so the current really pushes in close to the margin here. You can see by all the leaves on the surface floating past or flying past quite rapidly. There's a lot of flow here, a lot of depth. And normally Matt said there'd be plenty of fish here, but slow going. I've used a bait dropper to get a bit of chop worm, casters, and even a bit of corn down there. So very similar fishing to what I was doing before further down, but in a much deeper swim and where the flow is coming right in under my feet. So I'm going to keep feeding, keep the faith, and see whether the fish might just come on the feed as the river quietens down for the evening and the light levels start to drop a bit. Matt showing me how it's done. On the maggot, to be fair. Right, slight change of plan. Matt's just been showing me how to do it with a couple of roach. That was fishing shallowed up and with maggot. So we've both decided that to end the session I'm best off with a quiver tip rod further across, big lobworm on the hook, and he knows someone who's had a few nice perch out this summer fishing that way. And then I'm just going to go and try and have a bit of fun on the maggot for the last hour or so down on the float line. And we've both thought, well, if that gets a few silvers flashing through the swim as I catch one or two, it might just bring a few perch on the feed as well. So a couple of options now, and I'm just aiming to enjoy the last hour or so on the river before work begins again the next day. There we go, first run through. Oh, he's off. I think that was a little dace. Oh, nothing exceptional, but I've had a few small roach now and a tiny chublet. And again, we're just hoping that this might bring a few perch for a look at the extra activity, but the irony is I am catching them holding back. The swim shallows up a little bit and they're on the slope. That's where the feed seems to be gathering, even when it's been put in by a bait dropper. And so I'm just holding back and easing the rig up this slope where it shallows up, and that's where some of the bites are coming. And it's lucky I'm not doing a long trot, because the sleeper rod with a worm is just a bit further downstream, so I don't want to interfere with that. I've come up to do a little bit of upstream feeding. It really is deep. Letting Matt have another go before he heads home. Well folks, here we are back at the ranch in the garage, just sorting the tackle out before heading back in to see the family. I packed up in the dark, I gave it every chance, but even that sleeper rod didn't go on the lobworm. And talking to Matt, it just felt like the river wasn't quite right today for whatever reason. There was no obvious thing to put our finger on, but he put me in one of his favourite pegs and was gobsmacked that there weren't more roach there queuing up. It's a spot where he's had some really nice fish in various different seasons. Said I had the right bait, right approach, and of course we tried everything from trotting to putting a bomb rod out, but the big perch and the big roach were not in evidence today. And it's just somewhere I'm going to have to go back and explore more and try again in different conditions, different weathers, different times of the year. I've no doubt there's good fish there. I've seen the pictures, and I've got to say I love it when anglers, some of whom you know, some of whom are new contacts for me, are trying to help put you on fish. You know, there's a lot of secret squirrel behaviour goes on in angling, and I do understand people that put in a lot of hours working places out or finding particularly good spots. I do understand them wanting to keep it under the hats, but I've got to say I've come across quite a few really generous anglers since moving to Guildford who've wanted to try and help me find the fish, and I've no doubt if I go back there, say under different conditions, I may well connect with some of the big perch and roach that live in that stretch. Of course, if you're watching this and you're someone who fishes it regularly and knows every inch of the river, and you're happy to share your experiences or even a few tips, feel free to do so in the comments. Be great to hear from you, and hopefully I'll bump into you one day on the bank. You know, on this channel I believe in sharing the average days just as much as the brilliant days, the red letter days, and I've certainly had some really great trips so far this season. This one not so much. A few modest sized perch, plenty of small silvers and even a tiny jackpike. But I hope you've still enjoyed it. It's a really lovely piece of river, even if the fish weren't quite in the mood. And stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you again soon on the bank.